Hey everyone, it's Autumn. Today I wanted to do a video where I do a full face of makeup, doing as much as I possibly can using this new Danessa Myricks palette. So this palette says you're supposed to be able to use it for eyes, brows, face, lips, all of that stuff. So I have it on my lips. I've contoured with it. I've done my eyeshadow with it. So if you want to see how I achieve this look, that is coming up next, and then at the end of the video I'm going to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like about this, and also do some comparisons to some other similar formulas. So I have my foundation on. That's all I have on is some foundation and concealer, and we're going to go ahead and get into using this palette. So I will say that I didn't put on powder or anything like that. I do know that these shadows here are kind of like a cream to powder situation, so I'm not 100% sure how they're going to wear over just foundation. Maybe I should have powdered first. I don't know. But they're supposed to do a little bit of everything. So it looks like you should be able to use them for your eyes, your brows, your face, and your lips. We'll see about the lip situation. But this looks super handy to have. And I just want to play around with it. The only shadow in here that looks like it's got any kind of, well, two of them look like they might have a little bit of sparkle to them. And I don't know if you're going to pick up on it. This one and this one. I swatched that one because I wasn't sure if it was just sparkle from here that went over there. But let me do a little weird. So when I swatched them, the sparkle that was on top went away. If you have this palette, let me know if yours looks like sparkle or is that like a contaminant? Let me swatch and kind of look. Yeah, I don't see any sparkle. All right. So what we're going to do first is we're going to kind of just sculpt the face a little bit. So typically I don't do a lot of contour or anything like that, mainly because I'm lazy. But since this palette can do it, we're just gonna kind of play around and see what we can make happen. All right, so one thing I will say for this being a face and eye palette, these pans are pretty small to get a face brush into. So I'm gonna use this Zoeva 110 face shape brush. I love this brush for applying cream blush and even like foundation and things like that. And I'm gonna jump into the shade called Chiseled, and there are two formulas in here, by the way. You've got like this sort of like putty kind of cream to powder formula, and then you have the powder. I'm just gonna go into the larger pan, which is the putty cream to powder, and try to get some of that on this brush, which still is kind of like, you know, difficult to load a brush up in those pans, and kind of just go in where along like where my cheekbone is. I'm having a hard time thinking. I don't know if you guys can tell, but my face is a little bit puffy still. My lymph nodes are still swollen. Yeah, you can literally see my lymph nodes. I was sick all last week. I had COVID, and so I was able to edit while I had COVID and get some videos up, but I wasn't able to film any additional videos. So I'm hoping this week, now that everything is slowed down with Army, that I can actually start putting up videos regularly again. I actually like this because it's really subtle and it gives just a little bit. So I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna do the other side. This side I have breakouts, so it's gonna be interesting to see also if this formula picks up any product I put down to cover the breakouts. I'm gonna try to like stamp it in more instead of like blending. But we're just gonna see if you're somebody with acne and that's kind of a concern for you. We'll just see kind of how it wears. So typically, a lot of the times I like to go through, do my makeup, and then spot conceal on the areas where I have to. But it's a little bit harder to spot conceal when you're doing like bronzer and all that stuff, because it's hard to keep the color the same, but then also like the texture of products the same too on the skin, if that makes any sense. Like you can go in later with a concealer, but it is going to be a slightly different sort of look. So sometimes that's kind of where underpainting comes in, where that might actually be a better fit for you. Okay, I'm gonna stop doing this though, because I think I'll go down the sides of my nose. And I like to sculpt my eyes a little bit too. My eyes are also super puffy. Everything's puffy right now. I used a beauty blender today, and I just want to go over and see if I go over with what I used to apply my foundation, if it helps it blend a little bit. And I think it does. All right, so for the eyes, I'm gonna go in with the Sigma brush that's like super old, and I'm pretty sure it's scratchy, but I'm gonna go in and start loading up my brush with that same shade and taking it just into the crease and then kind of out a little bit. And I also want to put this under my eye. So I like this putty formula so far because it seems pretty sheer and buildable. And my main concern with this palette when I saw it, because I like more desaturated kinds of makeup, very sheer makeup, my main concern when seeing all these colors is that this palette was going to be too deep and unusable for me, but these seem to be blending beautifully. I do want a smaller brush though, and I'm just going to take that same shade and go under. I wonder if she is going to come out with these shades individually, to where once you go through a shade, I find that if you're using this on your face, you might go through certain shades quicker than others. I'm wondering if she's going to come out with the individual pans, because they are magnetic, if you can see that, to where you should be able to just pull it out and replace it. So I hope that does happen. I find that a lot of times though, when companies come out with this and they have the whole idea of these pans being magnetic and you being able to replace them, they only last for like a year or two if they come out with those magnetic things, and then they just stop doing it. So if this were a product that you were really interested in, or you became very reliant upon for your everyday makeup, I wonder how long that they would actually make those available. And I'm sure if they're not doing well for the company, obviously they're not going to like continue to keep them available. But that is something I find that a lot of companies do, and then all of a sudden you can't get the product you need. And then you have to go around searching, you know, to find a good replacement. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in with the shade called Sandstone, which is the lightest. And I just wanna kind of sweep that over the eye to get rid of like any veining I may have on my eyelids and discoloration, and just see what that looks like. My go-to look lately has really been just kind of a brightened eye. And I'm wondering, I'll bring that all the way up. Now, if you are much more fair than I am, I can already see that this leans pretty yellow. And if you're much, you know, more fair than I am, this isn't going to be that type of shade for you. So it would almost be cool. I hope she comes out with a secondary palette here and comes out with like a pure white. Because these are a putty, it would be nice. You can kind of mix back and forth, and they're kind of sheer, which you can do with regular eyeshadow too. But it would be nice to have a pure white kind of shade to mix as well. Okay, what I'm noticing, and I'll kind of zoom you in and see if you can see this. So I did a very sheer sort of application for my foundation. And you can apply this also very sheerly, but it almost has like that sort of, there's like an opaqueness to it, which again, I built it up. But just the texture is a little bit different. And I think once I powder my face, when I'm all done with my makeup, it's gonna meld a little bit easier. It does feel slightly tacky, but it looks matte. Like there's not really any shine on the eye compared to the face, which is pretty interesting. All right, so I feel like I need to get a little bit more daring with the looks now. I'm gonna go in with this smaller brush here. I love a kind of pukey color, and they give you like two in here. You've got Mirage and Desert. So I think I'm gonna go in with this one right here, which is Desert, and I'm gonna build up my outer corner, and then we're gonna go in with some powders over top. I really like how buildable these are. It's very airbrushed, which I think is good if you're somebody who doesn't like to spend a ton of time blending. I think this formula is great just because it slowly, which I guess you have to build it up, but like it's hard to mess up. I think this looks beautiful. So I'm gonna go in now with a little bit of the powder, which the powder of Desert, or of any of them, it's a very slim area to get your brush into. The other thing is I'm kicking that off and it's a little bit powdery, and since they're right next to each other, I wonder how much powder is going to get into those putties and if it's going to affect performance over time. Ooh, so the powder does add quite a bit of pigment, and I think it looks nice, but it definitely isn't a slow build like the putty is. And I'm going to kind of try to just kind of blend and bring up and out. Like I find sometimes if you don't like blend and bring up and out, it's like you have an eye look that's like contained here, and then you have your face makeup, and when they don't kind of like blend kind of together seamlessly, it looks way more makeup-y than had you just like blended it all in together. Like it's a more seamless look. Okay. And let's go in with the powder and sandstone here to kind of build over the center and into the middle. So typically I would be pretty happy with this look, and I wouldn't want to add like a ton of liner. I don't wear a lot of liner, but we're going to try to use this palette today in all of the ways that we can use it. So I want to go in with the shade Sculpted, and I'm going to start with the putty. Let me find a good brush for that. Perfect. So I'm going to go in with this. This is the Wayne Goss number 8 brush, and I'm going to go into the putty and then work it into my lashes. Right into the base of the lashes there. I'll zoom you in. And I'm going to wing it a little bit just to kind of see. There we are. Okay, so on this side I wasn't able to be as precise as I was on this side, so I'm going to go in with my finger. Maybe I'll do like a small brush and kind of blend and just see how this blends. I'm assuming that since on the rest of my face I was able to make, there we are. Actually that blends beautifully. So I'm going to see if hopefully this hasn't set down and I can kind of even it out and blend this. Nope, it did not sit down. The eye looks probably look different because I have a little bit more lid space on this side than I do the other. So I am going to go in and try to close in that lid space a little bit and bring the liner in just a little bit further. And then I'll blend it. Okay, so I'm really liking that. I think this is a very beautiful diffused look, but I am going to go in just to test with the powder version of that shadow, and I want to try to get a more precise brush. I'll use this one, and we're just going to go in on the powder side right here, and I'm just going to push that into the lash line to kind of set, and then I want to use the same brush right here just to kind of blend and diffuse. I'm gonna go in with the shade Desert right here on the powder side and run that along the lower lash line and also over the upper lash line where I just diffused that as well. Okay, so we're gonna stop messing around with the eye look for a minute and we're gonna go into the brows. I've recently switched over from putting a lot of powder and stuff in my brows just because it doesn't look as natural as I would like it to. But we're gonna mix some of these and see if we can't find something that works in the brows. So I'm looking at this and this seems a bit dark, but we're gonna try it out. We're gonna start with the putty. And this is the shade Sculpted again. And I'm just gonna kind of lightly go in to my bald spots. And I should have I combed my brows up before the start of the video, but I should recomb them up just to double check to kind of get a good direction. And that color isn't too bad. I have I trimmed my eyebrows and accidentally trimmed too much over here. And I have a notch taken out of them. So this color isn't too bad. All right, and I'm gonna go in now with this. This is my current favorite brow wax I've been using. And this is the Fluff Up Brow Wax from Benefit. And I'm just gonna go in and kind of move and shape the brows to where I want them to be. And then I may go back in with a powder. Okay, so we're gonna go back in just with a teeny tiny bit of the powder. And I'm trying to debate should I use this powder, which is Sculpted that I just used the other thing for, or this is too red. I gotta go in with Sculpted. All right, and also Sculpted looks much lighter here in the pan and on the thing, but once you blend it, she's dark. All right, so just a little bit of that powder right in here. Okay, so yeah, looking at it, this isn't this is a little bit dark for a brow, darker for a brow than I would typically go. But I will say that these products are very versatile. Guess I'll give the final at the end, but I am liking how blendable everything is. All right, so I'm gonna jump off here really quickly, apply a little bit of mascara and blush and maybe some highlight, and then we will look at the lips. All right, so I've applied some blush. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what I used on my face just in case you're curious. I used the shade Rose Bronze from Chanel on my cheeks. And here it is. So I feel like Chanel blushes are just beautiful, but I used that and then a mix of these two highlighters from Fenty Beauty. Here we are. Because this is too pink and then this is too golden, I just mixed the shinier halves and then just put them right here. And then I did use some setting spray and some powder to kind of set everything in place. So that is the face makeup. And now we're gonna dig in and put some of this on our lips. So these colors are very contoury and very brown, which typically to do a full on lipstick, that's a bit much for me. But what I will say is a lot of lip products tend to go very pink on me. Colors just show up more pink than I want them to. I want them to be a little bit more subdued. So I think this is gonna come in helpful for me. And I'm gonna mix together Chiseled and Desert. So a little bit of that gray and a little bit of that golden olive color in Desert. There's definitely a little bit of green in this. And I'm gonna go with this brush just around the perimeter of my lip. Let's see here. And it should add a slight kind of contour to the lip. I need to get a brush though that's maybe a little bit more structured. That one's too flimsy. Let's try this concealer brush. That's what I would typically use this for, would be concealer or kind of cream shadow application. So let me do that same mixture. There we go. And if you're anything like I am, so the vermilion border around my lips isn't like pigmented like my lips. There's a transition to where it's still lip, but it's skin tone. And I'm just gonna fill in that area with this and then kind of drag it in. Okay. So I think that looks pretty good for what I want. And then I'm gonna go in with this from Dior. This is the Lip Glow, and this is the shade Mahogany, just on the center. And just to kind of blend together, I think that looks good, but I did accidentally blot a little too hard and go up there. So when I blot and I go a little too hard, take my foundation sponge and I just kind of hold my lips like this. And there we are. So I'm gonna do my hair and then I will be right back and we are going to talk about this palette. I have some opinions. All right, I'm back. I've done my hair and I've allowed everything to kind of settle onto my face. And the one thing I want to point out here is, I think as far as it's being used on lips, as you can see, this has again traveled up. I think that I would just rather use a lip liner that's going to stay in place. This does not stay in place on lips. I think if you are doing maybe some editorial makeup and you don't need it to stay a long time, fine. But obviously if you're using it on your lips, you're not going to be able to touch up throughout the day. It does travel. So that's not really ideal. I think that this is actually great for the brows. You have a lot of different options in here. You have kind of a putty and a powder. But what I will say about having the putty, again, like on the lips, it kind of travels. It never fully sets down unless you use the powder along with it. So for me, I was actually able to go in with a Q-tip because I felt like I maybe overdid it in areas, and I went in with a Q-tip and kind of just cleaned up those areas. And I wouldn't be able to do that as easily had I used actual products that were meant for the brows. So I kind of like it in that, but also it's not one of those that's gonna stay all day. Then use on the face. I actually really liked this on the face. I did not use the powder on the face though. I just used kind of the putty to powder formula. And what I find for using that is it blended really well. It does not look like I have contour on my face. I like it. And for eyes, this is actually where I think it serves its best purpose, because obviously you can set it, and I think they did a really nice job, even though these do not look like the same color in the pan. They did a nice job of actually color matching them to be very, very close. Let me swatch them side by side. So obviously this is the powder. I'll build it up a little bit more. There we are. They're very close. And I think they did that on all of them, did a very good job. A lot of the times, like that one right there is like probably the most different. Also, Bark is a little bit different. I'll do the same thing in Bark over here where they look different in the pan, like the putty looks to be much darker, but it's not. So I think they did a very nice job matching those to each other to where you can just set it and it's not gonna change the color of the putty formula that you put down. Again, I mentioned that the putty formula doesn't really ever set down because I had some on the back of my hand, and then when I was in there doing my hair, I smudged it and it still smudges out. So I feel like if you want it to last all day and not crease, you will need to go in with a little bit of the powder. But what I did like is that you can kind of go in and kind of get like a blown out look with the putty and then lightly go in with the powder, which I really like the kind of blown out look of the putty. And the one thing that is a little bit different with that is the powder is so pigmented, you have to be very careful when you go in and you try to blend it out, or you might lose some of that seamless sort of blown out airbrushed look that you started with the putty. So that is kind of like, I guess, a drawback of it, but as you can see, I was still able to blend it out and it looks seamless, so it wasn't that huge of a deal. I'm going to use this more. This was just a first impression, but I think that this might end up becoming a favorite just because of the ease of use. So I had mentioned in another video kind of what this formula compares to. So I'm going to pull out a couple of different things in my collection that has a comparable formula. So obviously these are not color dupes. I'm just kind of comparing the formula here. But Lisa Eldridge has a couple of those sort of like putty sorts of eyeshadows that are also very seamless and airbrushed. I will say though that Lisa Eldridge's is less putty. It definitely kind of does have like that nice putty effect in there, but it's a little bit less putty, a little bit more eyeshadow with the Lisa Eldridge formula. So if you were curious about how those compared, yeah, here's another one here where they kind of just go in and they blend effortlessly. So I would say that that is very similar. Let me swatch similar colors to the Lisa that I just swatched. So I have the shade Bark and Chiseled, I guess. So they are very similar to the two I just swatched from the Lisa Eldridge, Bark and Chiseled in here. I will say though that the Lisa Eldridge seems to, if you can see up close, have a bit more sheen to them once on. And the Lisa Eldridge does not need to be set, whereas in this formula, I would say if you want long wear, you're probably going to want to set it. The next formula I want to compare to is Natasha Denona does have some of these shades throughout some of her palettes. I pulled out the Biba because I knew for sure that the shade Spot right here was that, I think, is also Tar. Spot is for sure. But again, the Natasha Denona seems more powdery. So here's the Natasha Denona, and I'm going to swatch it next to the shade Tourmaline from this one. And when you put your finger in it, it really does feel like a putty. So this is Tourmaline, and then this is the Natasha Denona shade in Spot. And this definitely has more of that kind of putty cream shadow feel, but definitely similar. And then the last kind of comparison formula are these from Tom Ford. So these, I have Smoky Quartz here. So it's kind of like this sort of matte formula from Tom Ford, where it definitely, again, feels like a putty type shadow. But again, it doesn't need to be set. But again, same airbrush kind of effect. So I would say overall, you get the same effect from all of those shadows, kind of like that creamy, blendable, airbrushed effect. But in this, it's just slightly creamier. I think it melts a little bit easier on your skin when you go to apply, and it's just a little bit more seamless, but this does need to be set if you want it to last all day. Again, it may last all day. I'm just trying it out, but what I could tell when I just smudged my hand, about a half hour after initial application, it still moved around. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. I will give you guys an update on this though as I continue to use it. So anywho, I hope that was helpful. And if you want to see a similar kind of video with this new Patrick Ta palette, which again are the matte shades, you've got the warm and the cool and a couple of cream shadows here, let me know. I thought it was really interesting that they came out around the same time. And I think there's another resurgence of neutral palettes again. I know that neutral palettes are always like sprinkled throughout releases, but there for a while it was really hard to get like a good everyday neutral palette. I found that people like Pat McGrath and Natasha Denona were putting out really colorful sorts of palettes with like those really special shades. And for me, my comfort zone are neutral palettes, so this is very exciting for me. These are both like right up my alley. So anywho, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.